So this morning I want to talk a little bit about music. Specifically my journey with music and me trying to play the guitar. I've shared about me trying to play the guitar before because it's something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I really, really enjoy. And so it's easy for me to draw parallels between that part of my life and my faith life because that's also something that I'm really passionate about, something that I love. I remember when I started playing, I had Dad's 12-string guitar and he took 6 of the strings off and we put a capo on it and I tried to play that. And then eventually I got a little red Squire Stratocaster with, the one that everybody gets to start with. Oh, I love that thing. I learned a couple of chords. I learned a song or two. I knew like one scale and played those things over and over and over for hours and hours on end. Just playing my things. And with the scales, we call it noodling because it's noodly, noodly, noodly. So I just noodled for hours on the stuff that I knew. I did that for years. And then I tried to hang with guys like Jeremy or Nathan or others Billy back in the day at Heineman when we went there. And I realized I couldn't keep up. I wasn't good enough to play with them. Because I had mostly taught myself and sort of stayed insulated and made up my own ways of doing things, I did all kinds of things wrong. I held the pick wrong. My hands were in the wrong positions. I could only play in cowboy chord position and maybe one other one for a solo, but I was super limited. I was slow, I was sloppy, and I was really predictable. So at some point I realized that I had a lack of knowledge, and that lack of knowledge was preventing me from progressing. Romans 10, starting in verse 1, it says, "Brothers and sisters, my heart's desire and prayer to God for the Israelites is that they may be saved. For I can testify about them that they are zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on knowledge. Since they did not know the righteousness of God and sought to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. Christ is the culmination of the law so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes." Paul here, he's talking about the Israelites and he's saying they want to put in the effort. They're zealous. They want to do it. But their enthusiasm isn't grounded in the knowledge of Christ. So they're trying to come up with their own version of righteousness. And I imagine their own version of righteousness was about as good as Adam's own version of playing the guitar. Not great. I talk about playing guitar, but find a parallel that works for you. Find an analogy that works for you. Something that you're passionate about. Think through your journey with that thing. Have you ever wanted so badly to do something? You had all the intention, all the want to, and you just couldn't because you didn't know how. You didn't have the knowledge. That was me when I started playing, and it's still me sometimes now. I want to do it in the worst way. When it comes time, I'm stuck because I don't know what to do. I think this overall feeling is a tendency that we could say is more common in our youth, or more common when something's new to us. We have all this newfound enthusiasm for whatever it is, whether it's finding God for the first time or finding a new hobby, wanting to get into something. I'm terrible for this. When I get a new hobby, Katie's like, there goes the bank account, because I just go all in. I have all this enthusiasm and generally no knowledge. And so things don't often go that well for me with that stuff. So Paul here, he's addressing that they have the want to, but not the know-how. They have the energy and the effort, but it's not grounded in knowledge of Christ. So they made mistakes. They established their own righteousness instead of submitting to God's. If this is you, when it comes to faith, I think the lesson to be learned is to slow your roll long enough to get some knowledge. Work and grow alongside others who are more veterans in the faith so that they can explain things to you, help you understand things. Do your own study. Spend time in the Word. Don't just run out there and think, I'm super Christian day one, I'm ready to go. Just take the edge off just a little bit and spend time considering, thinking, contemplating, learning from others. It's hard to do, and I don't want to throw a wet blanket on anybody. Trust me, that's not what I'm saying. If you got the energy, we've got places to plug you in, for sure. We want to do that. We want to get all the energy out of everybody, because that's more fun that way. But having said that, there's a time for us to learn and a time for us to understand before we think we know what we're doing. If this is not you, if you do have some knowledge, I think Paul has a lesson for you too. Romans 10:14. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. He's really practical right here. How can they call on one they haven't believed in? How can they believe in one they haven't heard about? How can they hear about it unless somebody tells them? It's just basic logic here. That's your charge if you know the good news. Make sure that others hear about it. Make sure you don't keep it to yourself. I believe that people have an inner knowing that there is something more. I believe that deep down, people feel that life is more that we can see. I think we have an inborn sense that there was a beginning, and also that the end isn't our death here on earth. I think because we have that inside of us, it motivates us as individuals and as a society to seek out and discover and try to learn more. We pursue with zeal science and medicine and technology. And that is great. Our lives are better for it. I'm glad that there are people that do that. There are people here that are pursuing those things. That's fantastic. But the zeal and the fruits of it, if that's all it is temporary. Amen. As long as we don't submit to the righteousness of God. And that's what was going on with the Israelites. Knowledge of the truth is important so that our zeal and our energy can be spent in ways that will last beyond our lifetimes, both for us and for others. I had to think of the Ethiopian eunuch when I was thinking about this. Do you guys remember him? He was on the road between Jerusalem and Giza, and Philip was on that road, or Gaza, sorry. And Philip saw his chariot and just felt like, I need to go talk to that guy. I don't know if he was like pulled over and he was like, I wonder if he's got a flat chariot tire, and like, I'll help him jack it up. I'm not sure, but he just felt like God was telling him, go check on that guy. Amen. And so he approached this Ethiopian's chariot, and as he got there, he could hear him reading the prophet Isaiah. He had a scroll there, and he was reading it. And Philip said, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And he said, "How can I, unless someone guides me?" And he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. That's Acts 8:30 and 31. Philip explained to the Ethiopian man what he was reading. And the whole interaction culminated with the man saying, "Hey, what's stopping me from getting baptized today? Can we do that? There's some water over there." And Philip's like, "Yeah, we can do that." And they went, he baptized the man, and the man went forward with new understanding and a new purpose and a directed zeal. He had the want to. He was reading, he was trying to get it, but he just needed somebody to help him with it. If you know the good news, that's your responsibility. Share and help others understand. If you don't, do like the Ethiopian did and said, "Hey man, what's this mean?" Talk to somebody here. Find out, what is this all about? What about this am I not understanding? If you need to get more knowledge, if you want to understand things better, coming to a church like this or some other good church on a Sunday morning is not a bad place to start. So we've established that aimlessly noodling on the guitar won't make me into a Jimi Hendrix. And we've established that knowledge of God and His Word is paramount for our success as Christians. So, the answer must be we need to go back to school. That's what I did. When I was firmly established in my musical rut, I took a different tactic. Instead of noodling the same stuff every day, I read articles in magazines. I watched hours of YouTube videos. I bought all the fancy gear. I had all the techniques and tips and tones and everything in my head. I was armed with all this newfound knowledge. And I sat down, I plugged in all my fancy gear, tweaked it just right, and played the exact same chords and the exact same scale and the exact same 3 songs I knew. What happened? I got all this knowledge and I'm still just as bad as I was before. How could this happen? Obviously that's what I needed, but I still can't play it. Where did I go wrong? James 1:22 says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do." I'd spent a lot of time reading and listening, but I wasn't doing. I wasn't doing the things I was reading and listening about. I was just absorbing it. I was I was the kid putting the book on his head before the test and just trying to absorb it all and hope it takes, and then I'm going to stand up there and be able to go. So if aimless energy is a hallmark of youth, I think that this is a temptation that strikes us as we mature. As we get older, we think we can knowledge our way through things. We can learn our way through things. That academic knowledge, having it in here, means that we have it here in our hands and in our mouth and everywhere else. Instead of practicing each concept to mastery and then adding on it, what I did was just try to absorb it all and then hope it took. It won't work for guitar and it won't work for faith.
Amen.
How many have been there?
Yes.
I think it's common, especially as we grow, to like the accumulation of ideas. We like the idea of things. We like the concept of things in the abstract in here.
Yeah.
But the practical, actually doing part, that's a different story. I read a sermon by a guy named Stephen Cole. I wanted to just rip the whole thing off. It's about Nehemiah, and I probably will at some point. I'll let you know that it wasn't me, but it was a great sermon. And one of the things he said was, every Christian is for spiritual renewal in the abstract. It's a wonderful concept. But when it means that I must actually change the way that I think, the way that I relate to my wife and kids, the way that I spend my time and money, or the way that I do business, now just a minute, you've gone from preaching to meddling.
Oh my.
I think he nails it. He nails it for where I find myself a lot now. I think I've studied more, I've learned more. If somebody asks a question, I can give the answer. Never mind, I can't do it myself. I can tell them what to do. I can tell Katie what to play. I can't play it, but I can tell her what to play, you know? Because I've got the knowledge, but I don't have the ability. I haven't practiced it. So I'm sure you can see what the solution is by now. We need both.
Amen.
We need the knowledge, but we've got to combine it with practice. We need the zeal and energy, but we've got to let the Word of God focus it for us. To grow and mature, we need both. The author of Hebrews was trying to help his audience mature in their faith, and he had this to say, Hebrews 5, starting in verse 11. We have much to say about this, but it is hard to make it clear to you because you no longer try to understand. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. Anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. He says, hey, you've been at this for a while. Long enough that you should be teaching others. But here we are, back at the basics, covering this all again. That's me on the guitar. It was a short story. I've only been talking for a couple minutes, but I've been doing this for 25 years. I started when I was 13. 25 years. I should be teaching people by now. Know what I'm doing? Learning from people on YouTube. It's been 25 years of struggling to get any better. It's easy for me to see my stagnation on my instrument because I know what things I can and cannot do. I know what songs I can and cannot play. It's painfully obvious. I can think I could play it, but if I can't actually play it, I know that I don't have it mastered. But what about our faith? Are there things that we still struggle with, that we've always struggled with? How many of us have the same struggle spiritually that we've had for years, for 25 years? How many of us either know and don't care or haven't bothered to learn? How many of us struggle with the same attitudes and the same sins that we did when we first started out? Think about it. I'm stepping on toes here, I know, but I'm getting my own too, so don't feel alone. If you're in your 20s and up, I want you to think about the first time that you decided to follow God. Maybe you haven't yet. If you haven't yet, please talk to me after. But if you're a little older, mid-20s and up, think about the first time that you decided to follow God. The first time that you went to church on your own, not because your parents drugged you. When you made a decision, I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to learn about God. I'm going to follow God. Now, think about the sins that you struggled with on that day. Think about the attitudes that you struggled with on that day. Is it any better? Have you matured, or are you still trying to work out the basics? If I'm honest, there are things that I've definitely matured in. I can think about some attitudes and some responses that I used to have, some behaviors that I can say, yes, these are things that I've gotten better at. These are things that I've matured in. But there are other things that I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't progressed nearly far enough. I am teaching, and I still don't have it. How many of us are in that same boat? The same things get us down over and over and over, and we want to take big jumps and take big licks and move and move and move and get older and more mature. But here we are, stuck, just rehashing the same stuff over and over. The key to maturing is the last verse that we read. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. We're not going to grow without knowledge, and we're not going to grow without practice. It says here that constant use will train us. The things that we read about, the things that we learn about God, we have to put into practice every day. Constant use. There were licks that I played this morning that I used to have to think about. I don't have to think about them anymore. You know why? Because I played the same ones over and over and over. I'm good at them now. They're under my fingers. They're ready to go. When I need something, it's ready for me. Because I've done them over and over and over. And our spiritual life's no different. When the temptation comes, if we can resist that temptation, 1 time's hard, 2 times is still hard, 25 times is still hard, 50 times starts to get a little easier. 75 times, maybe we're not even thinking about it. 100 times resisting the same temptation, we might not even know we're being tempted anymore. It's under our fingers. It's part of our lives. It's part of who we are. It's the way that we respond. If when we feel that anger boiling up in us and we're going to let somebody have it and we push it down the first time, you might literally be biting a hole in your tongue.
Yes.
But you do it long enough and you don't even think about reaming somebody out anymore because it's not part of your life. That's not who you are anymore.
Amen.
You could say you're faking it till you make it, but really what I think this is saying is you're putting into practice through constant use the principles of God. Call it faking it. You're not faking it. You're doing it. You're practicing it. You're practicing it until it does become who you are.
Yes.
So now we've outlined a plan for areas where we struggle. It's either a lack of knowledge, a lack of practice, or both. My challenge for myself this week and for you is to examine the parts of our lives where we struggle. Then think about why. Is it because we don't know or understand a better way? If so, let's talk about it. Talk to somebody here about it. Or is it that you don't practice? Is it that you don't put into practice the thing that you know? You're the only one that can help you with that. Nobody can do it for you. For us to grow and mature, we have to be honest about these things. We have to actually put effort into practicing the truth. Let's pray.